Hi, this is Linda Moulton Howe, and my weekly Earthfiles YouTube channel report on whatever is happening new or what may be old and seems new. And this week, what I started getting in emails from a whole lot of directions, universities, science news, were headlines saying, danger, cosmic rays, getting worse. And I wanted to get to the bottom of this. And what I realized is that it has been since around 10 years ago that we were looking at what was going to happen with the last solar cycle, and that there were physicists who were actually making dinner bets with each other about whether we were now going to start moving into a decade or two or three, maybe even four, in which the sunspot activity on the sun would keep going down, 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 and that the sun would become blanker and blanker without sunspots. When that happens and you have less solar activity, then you don't have as strong the magnetic fields emanating from the sun, and that allows the deep space cosmic rays to come in more and more and more, and that can be a real problem. It is a problem because cosmic rays can penetrate airliners, they can penetrate the ISS, they can penetrate astronaut suits. There's a lot of problems when you have increases in cosmic rays. And so tonight I thought what I would do is share some of what I have been learning and am putting in a brand new Earthfiles report that will be up in the next day or two about this fascinating new danger that we are going to be heading into solar cycle 24 in about 1 year. It's expected that by the spring of 2019, we should be in that solar cycle. And the big question mark is, if what's being reported now that I'm going to share with you continues to have a dampening inside of the sun so that the sun will be less and less sunspots, more and more cosmic rays, just exactly what are the implications? So now I'm going to go in deeper into what I have been researching in this new report, and then I'll take your questions at the end. And it was in mid-February of 2018, which is about less than a month ago. The solar activity that is being measured by various instruments was as low as 2007, which was the beginning of the last solar cycle minimum. Now, physicists project that solar cycle 24 that we're coming into within the next year, that they're placing bets again that we may be in a period of time where this could go lower and lower, and these are why they're placing bets. Could this be the century? Could this be the timeline in this century when Earth and the sun and the moon complex will hit another event like the Maunder Minimum of 1645 to 1715? That's when our sun was blank, without sunspots, most of that entire period, and there was, at the same time, what is called a little ice age. Everything got cooler. Even the river in London allegedly froze over. Now, why would lack of sunspots cause the Earth to get colder? Sunspots result from magnetic activity inside the sun, and so paradoxically, as spots in the sun get darker and cooler, the areas around the sunspots brighten up. So the more sunspots, which is what it should be in a solar maximum, the more solar energy reaches Earth. But why would we have a Maunder Minimum now in this part of the 21st century? Well, a couple of years ago, in the summer of 2015, the Royal Astronomical Society presented a Professor Valentina Zarkova hypothesis based on her computer solar cycle modeling. She was analyzing magnetic wave components that appear in pairs in different layers of the sun's interior. And at that Royal Society, she explained, quote, "These layers both have a frequency of approximately 11 years, although this frequency is slightly different and they are offset in time. Over the solar cycle, the waves fluctuate between the northern and southern hemispheres of our sun, and then combining both waves together in the computer and comparing to real data for the current solar cycle, what she found was that the predictions could be 97% accurate when they compared what their data at the study of these two layers in the sun and compared to back history, that everything that they were doing and calculating was 97% accurate. So they projected their data to the next solar cycle 25, which will be coming in the next decade. And it is supposed to peak at 2022. And the two waves will exactly be out of sync. So they will counter each other. And she thinks that that means that there is really going to be a reduction on sunspots and solar activity. And then their projection for solar cycle 26 is that the two waves will exactly mirror each other, peaking at exactly the same time, but in opposite hemispheres of the sun. And this interaction will be so disruptive that they will nearly cancel each other out, and that she and her team of researchers are predicting that this will lead to what we have called in the past, back in the 1600 to 1715, the Maunder Minimum. They're really expecting that we're headed to a Maunder Minimum. And she said, when the computer projects this full phase where the two waves will exactly mirror each other, we have conditions last seen only during the Maunder Minimum some 370 years ago, quote, close quote. Now, in 2017, this past year, the sun was totally blank, not a single sunspot on it, 25% of the time. Surprised a lot of people. And it was a year that the solar cycle was historically weak, with probably the lowest number of sunspots for 112 years. And the current 2018 computer models project that when we start getting into the first beginning of solar cycle 24, which is expected a year from now in the spring of 2019, that all the way out through solar cycle 26, expected to start around 2030, the sun's solar output could be even weaker, taking the sun down to a level of weak solar output not seen since the Maunder Minimum and the Dalton. Now, the Maunder Minimum and the Dalton Minimum, they were two various periods where scientists were keeping track and were not seeing very many, if any, sunspots on the sun, and both periods were cold. Now, that's why this link began. If no sunspots, then it's going to get cold. However, there are scientists today who look back at that historic period and say, well, when we had the Dalton period, there was this huge 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia, and all of that ash in the sky would have cooled the temperature of the Earth anyway. So the jury is out on that one, but no matter how you slice it, we are entering, because we're already in it, we've already come through 2017 with 25% of the sun's face being blank, and this is causing the cosmic ray density to go up. And that's what scientists now are concentrating on, because this is a data factor that should parallel a weakening in the sun's magnetic field, and it's definitely happening. Now, last month on February 22nd, the Space Weather Journal published what was entitled Update on the Worsening Particle Radiation Environment Now Observed and Implications for Future Human Deep Space Exploration. The lead author is Nathan Schwadron, PhD. He's a physicist in the University of New Hampshire Space Science Center. He also does work for the Solar System Exploration Research Virtual Institute at NASA Ames Research Center in Moffett Field, California. He warns in his new research the cosmic rays in the Earth-Moon system have been peaking at levels, quote, never seen before in the modern space age. The increasing cosmic rays can hurt astronauts. Professor Schwadron says further in his publication, quote, over the last decade, the solar wind has exhibited low densities and magnetic field strengths representing anomalous states that have never been observed during the space age. As a result of this remarkably weak solar activity, we have also observed the highest fluxes of cosmic rays. His concern is that as solar activity and magnetic fields get weaker and are projected to perhaps continue to weaken into the 2030s, there will be more and more cosmic rays reaching Earth. They are generated by supernova, explosions of stars that burst out into the universe, traveling near the speed of light. Physicists say cosmic rays are the most energetic particles in the cosmos. Their high energy allows these particles to penetrate nearly every material known to humans, including astronaut suits and spacecraft shielding. When cosmic rays penetrate shielding, secondary particles are produced that can damage organs and lead to cancer in humans. NASA has limits about how much cosmic radiation is safe for astronauts, but with these declining sunspots as we move toward solar cycle minimum 24, if solar activity continues to decrease, Professor Schwadron and his colleagues report that a leading computer model of solar activity to predict how bad cosmic rays could become during this next cycle now expect in 1919 to 1920. Their data suggests, quote, a 20% increase of dose rates from one solar minimum to the next. They will keep it increasing, the cosmic rays. And that in fact we now see that actual dose rates observed in the last 4 years alone exceed the predictions by 10%, showing that the radiation environment is worsening even more rapidly than we expected, close quote. Protecting astronauts from cosmic radiation is one of the key challenges facing future missions to the Moon and Mars. NASA is even considering the use of drugs on crews that will alter the DNA code of those people. The goal would be to alter those human bodies in such a way that the altered DNA would automatically repair any damage sustained from cosmic rays that could prevent cancer and disease. NASA Space Weather reports, quote, cosmic rays also penetrate commercial airlines, dosing passengers and flight crews so much that pilots are classified by the International Commission on Radiological Protection as occupational radiation workers. That's where the pilots are categorized. Some research shows that cosmic rays can seed clouds and trigger lightning, potentially altering weather and climate. Furthermore, there are studies that link cosmic rays to cardiac arrhythmia in the general population as cosmic ray amounts go up, which is what's happening now. Bottom line, if our sun is headed for a lot more blank days without sunspots, for certain cosmic rays will intensify even more in the decade or two ahead as the sun evolves toward what could be the deepest solar minimum in more than a century, and perhaps going as deep as the Maunder Minimum. That was the last little ice age. I hope that you all will tune in to earthfiles.com to see the amazing images, the graphics. I find that being able to report about the astronomy and the cosmology of this universe that we live in is as exciting as it is to explore real X-Files in animal mutilations and what are the truths about other intelligences in this universe interacting here. Because whatever happens with our sun, whatever happens in all suns, whether they supernova, whether they start declining for some physics reason that is still not understood, and cosmic rays continue to increase and increase on the Earth, every one of us needs to know. We need to have news stories about events such as a changing sun, a changing climate, for all of us to live smarter, to be able to live longer on a planet that is changing always and is as fascinating as this universe that we live in. So join me every day at earthfiles.com and send me your feedback on the new format of Earthfiles after 19 years. It's a new website in design, but it is the same website in which I am always trying to bring you the breaking news in science, environment, and real X-Files, and hope we can constantly have these dialogues with you on Wednesday nights about whatever seems to be the most important, the most exciting, and to get your feedback, which right now I would love to hear some of your questions.
Thanks, Linda. So first I would like to thank Christine and Kevin and Dar Smith for their awesome super chats. Thank you so much for the support.
Thank you.
Our first question is from Vicky. Isn't the Maunder Minimum followed by severe solar activity the next year?
I don't believe that there is that kind of data. The Maunder Minimum went on from 1645 to 1715. That's a long period. That's why it was called the Little Ice Age. That entire period, 1645 to 1715, that's when the Thames River in London allegedly froze, and that there was a lot of ice and snow, and that's why they called it the Little Ice Age. Today, scientists looking back, they keep coming up with, well, maybe it was this issue and maybe it was that issue. But then you come to the Dalton Minimum a few decades later, and it was also a blank sun for the most part, and not as long as the Maunder Minimum, but it was associated with temperatures getting cooler again, unless it had something to do with the Indonesia, it's the volcano that erupted. So you've got two periods that are well documented because there were so many people that were looking through what today would be crude telescopes, but they were studying the sun all the time because they were smart enough to realize that something had happened and the sunspots were gone. And that whole period, 1645 to 1715, that's why it stands out when you go to the Earthfiles report that I'll have up in the next day or two. You will see a graph that goes back and starts with the Maunder Minimum, and you will see that there's barely any activity in terms of solar energy. And then it goes all the way for this long period, and then you start seeing suddenly the sun starts coming back in to the more normal 11-year cycles of maximum and minimums, and then you see it doing this until it gets to the Dalton period. Then it goes down and makes a dip, nothing like the Maunder Minimum, but there's a little dip, and then it comes back, coming into the beginning of the 21st century, and now the projections are that it's going to start doing this again, and that the signs are that it's getting ready to go into a minimum in which, if there were 25% of the days in 2017, the sun was completely blank, and we go to next year and the minimum really starts, what happens if 50% of the days are blank? So we're almost in something like a living experiment right now in our solar system about what is exactly going to happen in a modern century, the 21st century, if we get a repeat of what happened all the way back in 1645 to 1715. This is going to be a fascinating time to see what does happen. And one of the physicists at NASA, Dr. Hathaway, he has been studying the sun his entire life, and he's got several dinner bets with some of his colleagues because he thinks that the likelihood is we're going to go into a Maunder Minimum. So this is another subject to keep track of, or keep coming to Earthfiles, and I'll keep track of it for you, and we'll keep reporting what I learn. Another question.
So Tim Effney has a question. Have you heard of any stories of giant crafts being seen siphoning plasma or energy from the sun?
I have seen web articles along those lines going back probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And I remember sending the very first image that ever came with a headline, big UFO interacting with the sun, and I sent it to a Photoshop expert. And on all images that come, that's one of the things that I do. I always am doing some kind of a reality check. And the answer that came back on that story was, and they showed me how somebody had gone in and had worked in Photoshop and had put this object in. And the reason at that time was clicks for money. And this is one of the problems of the world we're living in, is that there are real events, real phenomena, real X-Files. They are genuine. But there are too many people now misusing and abusing the web for clicks for money. And they will put out these hysterical headlines and use something in some animation or computer way to reinforce whatever their headlines are, to run for a day or so, to make money until somebody like me and the Photoshop people do some investigations and then find out, no, this doesn't add up. So the question is, could there be now, or could there have ever been, some kind of craft from some kind of an intelligence somewhere in the universe that might interact with suns, harvesting plasma or energy in some way? That's a hypothetical question, and none of us really know, because none of us know the full extent of what intelligences in this universe have done for the last 13.8 billion years. But when it comes to the relationship of technologies from someplace else in the universe using the sun, orbiting on the backside of the sun, doing some kind of a project where there might be a monitoring of this system by drones or androids in drones, meaning that there probably are some kind of intelligent artificial intelligence that are left as monitors around this solar system and many solar systems, and that there probably are triggers, sort of like Arthur C. Clarke's 2001. If you're a very advanced intelligence, let's say 1,000 million years beyond where we are, and that you seed planets and you have a desire to increase life in the cosmos, but you, the prime intelligence doing the seeding, you don't want to hang around all of the planetary systems and galaxies that you do work in. So you would create, at that level of advancement, the kind of artificial intelligence in whatever form is most adaptable to the planets that you are experimenting on. And that's what the monitoring system would be. That the monitoring system on this planet Earth may have been inside of the moon that we see at night for millions of years. That there have been people, many people, in the abduction syndrome who have said that they have been shown in some out-of-body way that there are computers and technologies inside of the moon, that the moon itself is a device, is a machine that was placed here, and it has always been monitoring, watching, listening to what is happening on this planet. So in that context, when people say that, okay, here is a quote-unquote photograph that is showing a craft that is getting plasma from the sun, none of us can prove it, and it's easier to disprove some of these stories because there are Photoshop and computer graphics people who can go in and analyze pixels and tell whether it was something that was jerry-rigged or not. And so this is a really good question, because every single one of us should now be looking at the computer and our social media and news and everything that is coming on the web. We should be doing it smarter. We should be keeping this whole issue of the Russians manipulating elections, people planting stories to make click money, that all of that is there, and that we have to watch out for it while we use the big power of the web for its positive evolution, which is that until this year and the end of 2017, I never had the equipment and the resources to try to do a live weekly news connection with the audience that comes to Earthfiles and Coast and Ancient Aliens and Phenomena Radio and all the things I do. This is a wonderful, wonderful connection. And this is what I hope that we can keep always going forward with trust, that there are some of us who really are trying to report the pressure of fact for all of you, to help you and for you to help me stay up with whatever might be happening where you live. So there's a downside to this computer world, but there is a tremendous upside. And I think that's what we're doing tonight on the Earthfiles YouTube channel. And I'll take one more question.
Great. So first, if we can thank Billy Newworth, Cherry Michelle, and Bruno Florenza for your amazing super chats. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Blue Sky would like to know why ETs or whomever show themselves or only communicate with some humans.
Well, it's an excellent question. It is a question that has haunted investigators going back into the 20th century, meaning that the human abduction reports, even though we'll call it the modern world, didn't hear much about human abductees until the Betty and Barney Hill case, 1961, in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. That was sort of the break case that went to the world, and then everybody said, oh wow, there are extraterrestrials here abducting people. Today we have I think a much more educated and refined lens to look at all of it. We may be dealing with extraterrestrial biological entities from another solar system, maybe in the Milky Way galaxy, maybe from another galaxy, that interact with this solar system and millions of others. That is probably a big category. They would be biological creatures like humans are biological creatures on Earth. But there is another big category, which is, and I think growing all the time, in what reports give us insights about, and what people like Jacques Vallée was writing about in his book 2 decades ago, Dimensions. That we think of this universe as so vast. How could there possibly be other universes and other dimensions? And yet now the most exciting papers, breakthroughs, theories, hypotheses, all the time coming now fast, is that the mathematical studies of our universe, studies of microwave radiation, studies of curvatures, and all kinds of things keep building up more and more and more pixels in a bigger picture, that we're in a universe that is somehow nestled or perhaps enclosed in a series of other dimensions, and all of it is based on frequency, like notes on a piano. We're in the middle C universe, and right next to us is the astral key, and next to the astral is the D key, E, F, G, A, and on, how many there are. And that would explain one of the huge puzzles in the UFO phenomena, where people see craft pop in, pop out. I've seen that myself. Looked like a yellow banana moving in a night sky in Gulf Breeze, Florida. It literally looked like a sort of like a banana. Yellow like a banana, but it was sparkling. The whole thing sparkled like a 4th of July sparkler, but yellow. And as it moved, I was with other people. There were 4 of us who saw this. It had a brightness and an oddness. There's nothing that humans have made that would look like this. And it popped in and it popped out in an arc of probably about that many degrees in the sky. Well, when you go into the UFO literature, whether it is from pilots or people in the abduction syndrome that this question is about, very often you will hear somebody use those words. I saw something and it was yellow, white, blue, red, orange. It could be many colors. It popped in. It looked like a 4th of July sparkler. It moved and then it popped out. It disappeared. If that is what happens when something from another dimension comes in, manipulates time because it's relating to another dimension, that could explain the time warps, the missing times, the time extensions, the time compressions that happen in the abduction cases, because those are not dealing with sheer biological entities. They're dealing with something that is literally taking humans into a different dimension where time is completely different, and that they have the ability to control the insertion point back on Earth in our timeline. That's a big discussion now among those of us who are trying to understand the complexities of the phenomena that doesn't entirely make sense on a pure matter and biological level. The third category, that so-called abductees, or people, or that which is involved with the discussion or the communication, could be time travelers. Our physics today confirms that there is no violation of Einsteinian physics and what is considered the general accepted laws of the universe currently, which are under great challenge and could be changing any day. But that right now, there's no violation if you have enough energy. If you can muster enough energy, you can go forward in time, you can go backwards in time. And if there are advanced intelligences, as one man told me back in 1984, that some of what we're dealing with, Linda, have the ability to dip in to the speed of light and dip out, whether it's for 1,000th of a second, 100th of a second, whatever the dipping in is. This was his phrase. They are concocting artificial immortality. Why could you concoct artificial immortality if you could dip in and out of the speed of light? because the speed of light, 186,000 miles a second, E equals mc squared, Einstein. If you reach the speed of light, all mass becomes infinite. When mass becomes infinite, there is no time. So, as I understood in 1984, our government knows we're dealing with other intelligences that have the ability to dip into the speed of light and back out and in and out in order to remain immortal. Now, if you take the box that's that big, and then you take and put that box inside all of the other dimensional boxes, and then you get to what I think is a divine field where there is no time, there is no entropy. It is truly the alpha to the omega. That's what is responsible for all the dimensional boxes in the matter universe we're in. And if the next part of what continues to be breaking through in various physics papers is that this universe that we are in is only one of billions, trillions. When I read these papers, I think back to a discussion I had in 1983. It was vivid. I was struggling trying to produce that home box office special that I've talked with you all about and have written about in my first book, An Alien Harvest. And it was a person who had a military uniform, but he told me, probably shouldn't have, but he told me that his military uniform was basically his working costume. He actually worked for the CIA. And he told me that the MJ-12 group that a lot of us debated about, are the documents real? Is MJ-12, did Truman really appoint these 12 military scientists and business people and a medical doctor to help him deal with the beings, dead and alive, that they were gathering from a variety of locations, not just New Mexico, and that the president and all of his various cabinet secretaries were probably running scared by the implications of not knowing what they were dealing with. And this man told me in 1984, he said, I have talked with one of the MJ-12 people, and they have told me that this universe that we are in, that seems so vast, that we now see headlines that it's expanding faster and faster, 9 to 10% faster than any calculations say that it should, and nobody understands why, is only one of an infinite number. And then when he said that sentence, he said, I'll share with you what that MJ-12 man said to me. He said, imagine in your mind a white beach, and then look down on the sand and think in your mind, looking down at the grains. He said, the truth is, we are in a macrocosmos in which there are as many universes as there are grains of sand on a large white beach. And then came the kicker sentence. And surrounding that white beach of all of those universes is a cold, dark sea. And this man said, I said to the MJ-12, well, what is the cold, dark sea? And he said to me, you don't want to know. What is the heart, the core, the bottom line on consciousness in relationship to mass, matter, light, dark, infinite number of universes, and who knows how many numbers of dimensions, and all of it related to a divine field. What I just shared with you is one of those exchanges that has kept me going ever since I tried to get to the bottom of animal mutilations in '79. It was discussions like what I just told you in the 1980s that began with trying to do the HBO project. That in some ways, I think those thoughts, those ideas, they penetrate us to the very core of our soul. And it's the soul that never seems to want to let go of getting to the bottom answer and the truth. And that is exactly what I think has been driving me for the last 4 decades. And that we are on a brink, it feels to me, no matter what is going on in human geopolitical conflicts and territorial chaos. It feels to me that we are at a crucial, it's an intersection maybe throughout this universe. Maybe something is being decided about what to do with life. And that we right now are at this intersection where somehow all of us who are struggling so hard to try to understand what the truth is, that we are finally going to get that major crack, whether it comes from astronomy, whether it comes from the ancient past in which the Greeks and the Anunnaki and the Sumerians were extraterrestrial civilizations based in this solar system. Why shouldn't we be told that? Why shouldn't we understand the truth of the real history on this planet, in this solar system and beyond? That, raising that question is on the other side of what is allowable to do with life. Standing up primates on Earth, according to everything I've been told and read in documents. Extraterrestrial biological entities manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien. That was 2 million years ago in Africa. So who did that? What was the motivation to keep tweaking all of these standing up humanoids in the oxygen atmosphere of Earth? To do what? And what are we today in 2018 in relationship to all of the intelligences that have interacted with our planet and with this solar system? And going way beyond to the edges of this 13.8 billion light year universe. And then going beyond to the white beach and all those sand grains that are universes and all the dimensions. I hope that all of you listening tonight and more, I hope, will keep coming, that you feel as I do, that these questions, these images in your mind, provoked by people who have worked in our government, this is what we need to understand in order to survive the revolution of leaving from a time and a period where we have been so manipulated by fellow humans and other intelligences, to cross this intersection to a new time where maybe we become conscious of what the real truths are. And then we won't be so manipulated, and then maybe that will be the trigger that changes everything, because then the humans with the hybrids, the cyborgs, the androids, the drones that are in this universe. But the human mind and soul will know. It is the soul that is what counts. So on that note, I'm going to say until next Wednesday, and in between, I will have been in Phoenix at Phoenix MUFON. I'm going to be speaking this Saturday at the museum there, and I'm going to be talking about the bismuth, magnesium, zinc layered metal, which I think is one of the strongest, best pieces of evidence of something that has not been made on Earth. I've been studying it since 1996, and in 2018, it is still baffling, but we're making some progress. So, thank you for being here, and I'll see you next week.